What's going on, family? Welcome to another episode of the Season Monroe Show. I am your host, and today we're here to talk about Gladiator 2. Now, before we get into this Gladiator film, I just want to say I know I'm late. I had to watch the first film. And to be honest with you guys, I wasn't in a rush to watch the first film, so it took a while for me to watch the second film. Either way, I'm going to go on and say what I need to say. You guys have seen this movie by now. Let me get this off my chest. I watched the first Gladiator film a few days ago, just so I can get the feel of what I was going into for the second film. Now, after watching the first film, I just felt like, okay, where could we go from here? There's really nothing that appealed me to this film in 2024. Now, granted, this movie was released 24 years ago. I get it. There could be something there back then. Right now, I just don't feel the need to watch that movie. I didn't feel like it was a very uphill story. I just felt like we have a guy, he was tricked out of his position. He was upset that he was tricked out of his position, and everything just pretty much went downhill from there. There was nothing there. There was nothing to grasp onto in that film. And with this film, Gladiator 2, a lot of the patrons I've seen wanted to see Denzel in this film. Of course, Denzel is like one of the number one actors out there. He's phenomenal as Denzel. We've had this Denzel conversation before. My problem with this film is it wasn't needed. And when I say that, I mean it in multiple ways. So the kid that was in Gladiator 1 is now an adult. He was sent off as a child because his mother feared that something was going to happen to him because he was the heir to the throne. That storyline made no sense whatsoever. But again, for film reasons, I get why they tried to do this. And this film doesn't take place 24 years after the previous film. It takes place 16 years after the previous film, which was another drawback for this film, because I felt like if you want to do this film 24 years later, just make it make sense 24 years later. It didn't need that 16-year or that 8-year gap between the two that made it just seem like, okay, we're just throwing this in there and we're making it feel that this only happened 16 years later. It wasn't that important of a film you needed to stick to that 16 years. Now, granted, maybe something happened 8 years later in Rome that I don't know anything about because I didn't do too much research on it. But at the same time, I feel like that could have been exited out. That's just me personally. You could have went with the 24 years later thing and you could have went with the same storyline. It still would have been trash, but it would have made more sense to 24 years later. Now, let me get into the reason why I'm calling this film trash. First off, I feel like Ridley Scott is on a downhill battle right now with his films. To me, Napoleon, which was released last year around this time, I didn't mind Napoleon. I just felt like the story that was taken from Napoleon wasn't great enough to be on film. I felt like we were talking more about his personal life and his personal fetishes or whatever the hell, and we didn't get into the battles that he conquered as well as the battles that he lost and how he lost those battles. That was the problem with that film. And with this film, I feel like it's the same issue. Denzel plays a very important part in this film, and he's pretty much... He was a slave when Marcellus' father-in-law, I forgot these characters' names. Again, that's how much I didn't care about these films. Either way, he was a slave when the new gladiator's grandfather was in power, okay? And that was supposed to be this great deal, but it was the great deal in the third act. And I felt like that could have been pushed more towards the middle. That way we understand his motives. We've seen the Gladiator story in the first film, so we didn't need that build up as far as building him up to be the Gladiator because, again, it was just literally watching. It was a copy and paste situation where he's a slave and he works his way up to becoming a gladiator, so on and so forth. But, again, it wasn't needed. The Denzel story would have been more compelling to the audience, I feel. And just throwing that at the end of not the end of the third act, but throwing that at the third act and then rushing through everything else, it just felt like I didn't get, like I ate, but I didn't eat the right nutrients when it came to this film. It was just junk. And again, I get why people like the film, but I just felt like this film could have been 10 times better if they would have went with the Denzel story, his character storyline, and kind of built from there. At least in the middle part of the film, it just felt like throwing that curveball at the end was just like, man, this is a last minute write in because we don't want this story the same copy and paste. So we're going to throw this in there. And it didn't work out for me personally. Denzel is he's a great actor. He's Denzel. Was he believable to have been a slave and now a leader at the time in those Roman times? Probably not. Denzel is just too cool. He's just too cool. The way he walks, the way he talks. It didn't come from that time. And that's a part of the problem with Denzel. And I don't know why we didn't just grab Djimon Hounsou and kind of made a movie off of his character in the original Gladiator film. It would have been a lot better doing that. But again, I know they grabbed Denzel because they needed eyes on this film. And I don't think they would have got the same eyes on this film with putting Djimon Hounsou in it. So that's that. We just got something that was released that this is Denzel's first $300 million film, which is great. But at the end of the day, this movie damn near cost $300 million. So was it that great? And again, it's going back to the Ridley Scott thing. I just think that Ridley Scott needs to start taking a back seat. His film style just isn't with today's time. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just that he's delving on yesteryear. And I feel like a lot of those films from the early 2000s to 2005, 6, the Troys, what was the other one? The 300s and stuff like that. It worked back then because it was something spectacular to see on screen because we haven't seen much of that. And now it's just like, we're not really into that right now. It doesn't work in this day and time, unfortunately. I don't feel like those movies were that great at that time. And I remember watching them as a shorty. So again, some of the storylines that was in there were very compelling and very interesting to learn about. But other than that, I just didn't feel that it was, let's say, advantageous for me to watch these films. It wasn't nothing there that you couldn't have read a book about and learned within the summary of the book. So that's a part of the problem. I get when we want to go back to the Roman times, but if we're not going to tell the whole truth about the Roman times, I would just recommend just leaving it alone. Go into it hard, or just don't go into it at all. That is my stamp on that moving forward. So again, with this being Denzel's first $300 million movie, I want to congratulate him in that. But at the same time, we've seen what Denzel has done. There's nothing that you can tell me about Denzel. He is phenomenal, and he can do any movie that he wants to do, and is going to make a profit at the box office. Unfortunately, this was not a Denzel movie, so this is what you get. Yes, made $300 million, but it cost damn near $300 million to make, so I don't think that is a win. So what do you guys think? Go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. Did you see Gladiator 2? Did you watch the first Gladiator? Do you feel that this Gladiator deserved a sequel? Do you feel that Gladiator 2 deserves a sequel? Like, where do you feel like in this conversation? Let me know down below in the comments. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I'll see you next week for Movie Talk Monday. Peace.